In today's lesson, vocabulary lesson, we're going to talk about figurative language. And the specific part of figurative language that we will be discussing today are idioms. Here's a list of some of the activities we're going to work on today. Okay, for our warm-up, we're just going to discuss what are idioms. A figurative language is a way of using words to help create mental pictures or images. Okay, and idioms are a type of figurative language. A couple other figurative languages that you have learned about and we will discuss later on are metaphors and similes. Those are also figurative language. Today we're going to be talking about idioms. So let's look at this picture here, okay? And the quote beside of it says, Mrs. Ellis chewed out Gary in the hallway for his bad behavior. Okay, well, the picture shows somebody chewing something, but I don't think Mrs. Ellis really chewed on Gary. I hope not. No, so what does chewed out mean? Well, let's pull our little tab over here. An idiom is a phrase or expression that cannot be understood from the meaning of its separate words. It is important to look at a sentence context for clues to an idiom's meaning. Okay, so the word chewed out is an idiom that means yelled at. Okay, it does not mean that anyone or anything was chewed. The context in this sentence help us understand what the phrase means. I got chewed out by my coach when I was late for practice. Okay, so you know his coach was not happy with him for being late for practice. And so they probably got yelled at. Okay, and the same thing in this example here, that Mrs. Ellis yelled at Gary in the hallway for his bad behavior. He got in trouble. Okay, another thing, makes it really difficult for students or people to learn English. If maybe some of you have learned English as your second language, and when the words do not mean exactly the same thing, it's very confusing. Okay, so let's practice a little bit and learn some more idioms here. Because they have always been best friends, Anders knows that his brother would bend over backwards to help him. Okay, what does that mean? The idiom here is bend over backwards. I don't really think that his brother is going to bend over backwards to do his work like this man in the picture is. It means that he'll do whatever it takes to help him. Okay? He'll do whatever it takes to help. We blew up 50 balloons, but that was just a drop in the bucket compared to the 500 we need for the school carnival. Okay, the idiom here is just a drop in the bucket. Okay, now look at that whole full bucket there, and you have one drop dropping in. You have a lot more drops to fill that bucket, and that's what this idiom means, is that, yeah, we blew up 50 balloons, and it probably took a long time, but that's nothing compared to the fact that we need 500 of them. So a drop in the bucket. After the great day I've had spending the night at my friend's house is the icing on the cake. Okay, the idiom here is icing on the cake. You might even say is the icing on the cake. When something is the icing on the cake, what do you think that could mean? Think about that for a second here. Look at that lovely chocolate cake there. Okay, most people, not everybody, the icing's your favorite part of the cake, okay? And what they're saying is the cake is really good, but then they add this really good icing on it. So her day, let's look at the context clues around this here. This girl had a really fun day, but what made it even better was to spend the night with a friend. And that's why they say icing on the cake. Okay, in this activity, we're going to underline the idiom in each sentence. Then drag the word or phrase from the bottom. Okay, let me grab my pointer here to pull this tab out. And it says to remember to use the context of the sentence. That's the other words in the sentence. That's what context means. to help figure out the idiom's meaning. Okay, I'll grab my highlighter again. Let's go with green this time. Ray hit the books to prepare for the math test. Okay, the idiom here is hit the books. Okay, I don't think if you hit your book, I'm going to hit a book here, I don't think that's going to help us prepare for our math test. That'd be nice, but that's not how it works, is it? So what do you think hit the books could mean? And our answers on the bottom are our choices down here. I'm sorry. A special event, easy to understand, studied, is an expert, or to form an opinion based on looks. Okay, and this one would be studied. Okay, Ray studied to prepare for the math test. Lai's friends think that she wrote the book on being an athlete because she is on the volleyball, basketball, and softball teams. Okay, what does it mean that she wrote the book? Okay, she didn't actually write a book, but it means she is an expert, okay? Because she's very good. They think she's an expert, that she could very well write a book because she's so good about those. Arpana didn't want to judge a book by its cover, so she was friendly to the new girl who wore funny hats. Okay, the idiom here is to judge a book by its cover. What does that mean? Form an opinion based on looks. So she didn't want to say the new girl was odd or not friendly because she wore funny hats. She didn't want to judge her by the way she looked. She wanted to get to know her. So she was friendly to her. That's a great thing to do when new friends are around. It was one for the books when Julio got an A+ on his math test, since math is usually his weakest subject. Let me read that one again. I had some trouble. It was one for the books when Julio got an A+ on his math test, since math is usually his weakest subject. Okay, so the idiom here was it was one for the books. What do you think that means? Easy to understand or a special event? It was one for the books when Julio got an A+ on his math test, since math is usually his weakest subject. Okay, this one means a special event. You would think it would mean easy to understand because he did well on his math test, but it wasn't easy for him. But it was so special that he got an A+ that it should be written in a book. That's kind of what that idiom means. Okay. Now, we're going to underline the idiom. Highlight the words that help explain the idiom. And then it says to rewrite. We're not going to rewrite because it takes a lot of time, and I don't want your video to be super long. But let's pull this out first here. This talks about a couple more idioms, or actually 3 more here. Cut to the chase means get to the point. This refers to editing or cutting a film to get to the exciting chase scene in a movie. Okay, so that's where the idiom originally came from, but we use it in other, like if somebody's telling a really long story, you might say, hey, just cut to the chase. It means get to the point. Racing against the clock would mean as fast as possible. And this originally came from various sports events in which contestants do not directly compete against others, but instead are timed individually, and the fastest contestant wins. Like track, you're racing against the clock instead of racing in a race. Well, some races you're racing against others, but I'm thinking like a long distance race, you're more racing against yourself or the clock. At the drop of a hat means immediately. So this probably refers to the signaling the start of a race. They used to drop a hat to start the race. So that's where it originally came from, and we use it in different areas to mean immediately. So let's read this sentence in the green here. After listening for 10 minutes, Stewart grew impatient and wanted the judge to cut to the chase and announce the winner. Okay, and that right there is that cut to the chase. Get to the point. Okay, he's listening, he's growing impatient. Get to the point. The reporter had a deadline to meet, so she was working against the clock. Okay, again, we have that against the clock in there. She was trying to meet that deadline, and her deadline was a time, and she's racing against the clock. And this last one for this activity, my friend was ready to come to my house at the drop of a hat if I needed help. So she was ready to come immediately to help her. Okay, here are some more idioms that we're going to look at. We're going to tap the block to reveal the idiom and then highlight, or we'll just talk about any context words that help us with that meaning. The coach called a timeout to make sure everyone on the team was on the same page before the next play. Okay, what do you think was on the same page could mean? Okay, let's look at the words around the sentence to see what can help us. The coach was calling a timeout, and when a coach calls a timeout, everybody comes off of the field and he gathers them around him and he tells them something. He wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page before the next play. So he really wanted to make sure everybody understood what was going on and they were ready to play. When Jodi's parents told her she would have to cancel her sleepover, she came apart at the seams. Okay, humans can't fall apart, but you've probably had a shirt or something that might have ripped a stitch and you get a hole in it. Okay, well, why does it mean that she came apart at the seams? Well, her parents told her she was going to have to cancel her sleepover, right? Oh, and that made her mad. So she was upset. She was losing. Maybe some tears came out. Serena read between the lines and figured out that I was sad even though I was trying to be cheerful. So she read between the lines. Now, if you think of lines in a book, they have words on them, right? Well, they're saying she noticed something even though it wasn't said. Serena noticed something was wrong and she read between the lines because I was trying to be cheerful when I was really sad, and she noticed that. Okay, so those are a few idioms, and they're kind of fun way to add to your own writings if you know them. I am one of the people that have trouble with them, and I always say them the wrong way, but that's kind of fun too, especially for the people that I'm talking to.